In the fertile kingdom of Umuka, there lived a farmer named Ikena. He was known far and wide as the most hard-working man in the land. From sunrise to sunset, Ikena labored on his farm with patience and discipline. He did not cut corners, and he did not complain. He believed that honest work pleased both the people and the gods. Ikena's farm stood at the edge of the village, where the soil was dark and rich. His yam mounds were tall and healthy. His cassava leaves were green and wide. Corn stood upright in neat rows, and his vegetable beds were always full. His goats were strong, his chickens laid eggs regularly, and his sheep multiplied year after year. Many farmers wondered why his land never failed, even when others struggled. Some said it was luck. Others said it was blessing. Those who knew Ikena well said it was because he worked with a clean heart. Despite his success, Ikena was not proud. He greeted everyone with respect, from elders to children. When neighbors needed help, he gave without counting the cost. If a widow needed food, he shared from his barn. If a stranger passed through Umuka hungry, Ikena offered a meal. Because of this, people spoke well of him even when he was not present. His name carried honor, not fear. At home, Ikena lived with his wife, Adiz, a woman admired for both her beauty and her character. She was gentle in speech and firm in values. Adiz managed their home with wisdom and patience. She supported her husband's work and shared his kindness. Together, they lived a simple life filled with peace. Though they were not loud people, their home was known for warmth and respect. The kingdom of Umuka itself was a place that valued hard work and order. Elders settled disputes, traditions were honored, and the people believed that truth brought prosperity. In such a land, a man like Ikena stood out naturally. Even those in high places knew his name and spoke of him as a good example to the younger generation. One early morning, before the sun had fully risen, Ikena went to his farm as usual. The air was cool, and the ground was damp with dew. Birds chirped softly in the distance as he lifted his hoe and began to work. As he loosened the soil around his crops, he felt at peace, grateful for another day of strength and life. Then, without warning, he heard a sound. At first, it was faint, like a whisper carried by the wind. Ikena paused and listened. The sound was not the cry of a bird or the call of an animal. It was a melody, slow, sad, and heavy with sorrow. As he stood still, the sound grew clearer and louder. It seemed to come from the earth itself. His heart began to beat fast. Carefully, he followed the direction of the sound, moving step by step across his farm. The melody led him to a small patch of soil near his yam mounds. As the song rose, Ikena felt fear creep into his bones. Gathering courage, he scraped away the soil with his hoe. What he saw made him freeze. Buried in the ground was a human skull. Its empty eyes faced the sky, and from it came the sorrowful song he had been hearing. The sound was real. It was not a dream. Ikena dropped his hoe. His hands trembled. Fear seized him completely. Without looking back, he turned and ran, leaving his tools behind. His only thought was to reach the palace and report what he had seen, for he knew this was no ordinary thing. Ikena did not stop running until he reached the palace of Chi-Joke, the king of Umuka. His chest rose and fell as he bowed low before the throne, sweat covering his face and fear shaking his voice. "Your Majesty," he said, struggling to breathe, "I have seen something terrible on my farm. A human skull is buried in the soil, and it is singing." The hall fell silent. Chi-Joke leaned forward on his throne, his eyes fixed on Ikena. On the surface, his face showed concern, but deep within his heart, another feeling stirred. For a long time, the king had secretly desired Adiz, Ikena's wife. Her beauty and dignity had captured his attention, but her loyalty to her husband and Ikena's strong reputation had kept the king from acting openly. There was more. Ikena's family was respected, and his lineage was strong. If the royal line ever failed, families like Ikena's stood close to succession. This knowledge had always troubled Chi-Joke. As Ikena spoke about the singing skull, a dark idea slowly formed in the king's mind. Still, the king hid his thoughts well. "This is a serious matter," Chi-Joke said calmly. "The gods do not play with signs. We must treat this with care. Ikena felt some relief when he heard the king's words. He believed the ruler would seek truth and justice. To appear wise and fair, Ise Chijok ordered that the Ndi-ichi Omuka, the council of elders, be summoned immediately. Messengers were sent out, and before long, the elders arrived at the palace, their walking sticks tapping softly against the ground as they took their seats. The king turned to Ikena. "Repeat everything you saw," he commanded. With respect and honesty, Ikena told his story again. He spoke of the early morning work, the strange melody, how it grew louder and sadder, and how it led him to the buried skull that sang like a wounded soul. He did not exaggerate. He did not add anything. He spoke only what he saw and heard. When he finished, murmurs filled the hall. Some elders exchanged doubtful glances. Others frowned in deep thought. Singing skulls were not things spoken of lightly. Omuka was a land of tradition, but also of caution. "This is a strange claim," one elder said slowly. "Yes," another added, "such things are rare, but they are not impossible." The elders did not accuse Ikena of lying, but neither did they accept his words without care. They knew the danger of dismissing a sign too quickly and the danger of believing blindly. Ise Chijok watched them closely. Inside him, impatience burned. He wanted this matter to serve his hidden plans, but he needed to act wisely. If he rushed, the elders might turn against him. At last, the king stood. "We will not judge with words alone," he declared. "If what this man says is true, then the proof will still be there. Let us go to the farm and see with our own eyes." The elders nodded in agreement. This was the proper way. Ikena bowed deeply again. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said, relieved. "I swear by the gods of this land, I have spoken the truth." The king gave a short nod, his face still calm. "We shall see." Word quickly spread through the palace and into the village. A strange matter was unfolding. A singing skull was not something the people of Omuka had heard of in many generations. Curiosity rose like smoke. Soon, the king led the procession out of the palace. The elders followed behind him, and Ikena walked among them, his heart heavy but hopeful. As they moved toward the farm, villagers began to trail after them, whispering among themselves, eager to witness whatever truth awaited them. As they walked, Ise Chijok's thoughts were far from the skull. He thought of Adiz. He thought of power. He thought of how one moment could change the fate of a man, a family, and even a kingdom. By the time they reached the path that led to Ikena's farm, the matter had grown far larger than a single report. What began as a frightened farmer's warning had become a test, one that would soon reveal far more than anyone expected. The journey to Ikena's farm was slow and heavy with tension. Ise Chijok walked at the front, his royal guards flanking him. Behind the king came the Ndi-ichi Omuka, their faces serious and unreadable. Ikena followed closely, his heart pounding with fear and hope. As they moved through the village paths, more people joined the procession. Men left their compounds, women paused from their chores, and children ran ahead, excited by the strange news. A singing skull was not something Omuka heard about every day. By the time they reached the edge of Ikena's farm, a small crowd had gathered. Whispers filled the air as villagers pointed toward the fields. Ikena stepped forward quickly, eager to show everyone what he had seen earlier that morning. "This is the place," he said, his voice shaking. "Right here." Everyone turned their eyes to the spot. There was nothing there. The soil lay smooth and undisturbed. The yam mound stood tall and quiet. No skull. No movement. No sound. The air was still, and the earth gave no sign that anything unusual had ever happened. A deep silence fell over the crowd. Ikena stared at the ground in disbelief. His heart sank. He bent down and touched the soil, digging with his hands, searching desperately. There was no trace of the skull. No hole. No broken earth. Even the strange melody that had filled the farm earlier was gone. The land was calm, almost innocent. "I do not understand," Ikena whispered. "It was here. I swear it was here." The elders exchanged uneasy looks. Some frowned. Others shook their heads slowly. The villagers began to murmur, confusion spreading among them. Ise Chijok felt the heat rise to his face. In front of his elders and his people, He had been led on what now looked like a foolish chase. His chest tightened with embarrassment, and embarrassment quickly turned into anger. His eyes hardened as he turned to face Ikena. "Do you mock me?" the king thundered. His voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "Do you bring me from my palace to chase shadows and lies?" Ikena fell backward in shock. "Your Majesty, I would never—" "Silence!" the king roared. "You stand before me and tell tales of singing skulls, yet there is nothing here. You have made me look like a fool before my people." The crowd went quiet. Fear spread across their faces. Ise Chijok stepped closer to Ikena, his voice cold and sharp. "In Umuka, lying to the king is not a small offense. It is a crime against the throne." Ikena's legs gave way. He dropped to his knees, dust clinging to his clothes. He raised his hands toward the king in desperation. "I swear by the gods of our land," he pleaded. "I saw the skull. I heard its song. I have spoken only the truth. Please believe me." His voice broke, and tears filled his eyes. One of the elders stepped forward, leaning heavily on his staff. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "this punishment you speak of is too severe. In the history of Umuka, no man has ever been sentenced to death simply for lying to the king." "Yes," another elder added quickly. "Even if we doubt his claim, mercy and investigation must come first." The elder's words hung in the air, calm but firm. The villagers nodded quietly. Everyone felt the weight of the moment. But Ise Chijok did not soften. His face darkened further, and his eyes burned with determination. The shame he felt had turned into rage, and rage had sealed his heart. "I have heard enough," he said. "This man has insulted the throne with falsehood and superstition. I will not be mocked." The elders tried once more to speak, but the king raised his hand, stopping them. "There will be no more counsel," he declared. "My word is final." A chill ran through the crowd. Ikena remained on his knees, shaking, unable to understand how truth had turned into death before his eyes. The elders fell silent, knowing that the king had chosen pride over wisdom, and that nothing they said would change his mind. The earth remained quiet. And in that quiet, the fate of an innocent man was sealed. Ise Chijok did not sleep that night. Though he had spoken with authority before the people, his heart was restless. Deep within him, the truth was clear. His anger was not only about the disappearing skull. His true motive was darker. He wanted Ikena gone. With Ikena alive, the king's secret desire for Adiz could never be fulfilled. As long as the farmer lived, Adiz would remain loyal, unreachable, and protected by her husband's good name. There was also the matter of power. Ikena's family was respected, and his bloodline was strong. In a land where succession mattered deeply, such families were always watched carefully. To Ise Chijok, removing Ikena solved many problems at once. By dawn, his decision was firm. At first light, the king gave the order. "Ikena will be buried alive at Aman-di-Ise," he commanded. "Let it be done today." The message spread quickly through Umuka. Fear filled the air like smoke. No one had ever seen such a punishment carried out for an accusation of lying alone. Yet no one dared to challenge the king openly. Ikena was dragged to the village square under heavy guard. His hands were tied, his clothes torn and dusty. His eyes searched the faces of the people gathered around him, neighbors he had helped, farmers he had shared seed with, men who once praised his honesty. Now they stood in silence, fear sealing their lips. At Aman-di-Ise, a deep pit had been dug. The elders were present, their faces heavy with sorrow. Some looked away, unable to watch. Others stared at the ground, ashamed of their helplessness. The villagers gathered in a wide circle, whispering prayers under their breath. Ikena was forced to his knees. He did not scream. He did not curse the king. His voice trembled as he spoke softly, calling on the gods to witness his innocence. As the guards pushed him into the pit, a cry rose from the crowd. It was Adiz. She pushed through the people, her hands clutching her stomach. She was with child. Her face was streaked with tears, her voice raw with pain. "My husband is innocent," she cried. "You are killing a truthful man." The guards held her back as the earth was shoveled over Ikena's body. Each sound of soil hitting flesh struck her heart like a blow. When the pit was finally filled and leveled, the crowd stood frozen. The execution was complete. Adis collapsed to the ground. That day, Umuka lost more than a farmer. It lost its peace. Adis returned home alone. The house that once held laughter and warmth now felt empty and cold. Grief wrapped around her like darkness. She wept until her body shook, then she grew silent, her tears turning into quiet anger. She mourned not only her husband, but the truth that had been buried with him. She spoke to no one for days. Inside her, a fire burned, grief mixed with fury. She knew her husband had been sacrificed, not for justice, but for the king's selfish desire. The child in her womb became her strength, the last piece of Ikena that remained. Ys Chi-jok watched from afar. To him, the deed was done. The obstacle was removed. He believed the path was now clear, clear to claim Adis, clear to secure his power, clear to rule without challenge. He felt victorious, certain that fear had silenced the land and that the matter was finished. But beneath the soil of Amun-Dis, the earth remembered. And Umuka would not forget. Months passed after Ikena was buried at Amun-Dis, but the wound his death left in Umuka did not heal. Life continued on the surface, yet beneath it lay fear, anger, and unanswered questions. Adis, now a widow, lived quietly in her home. Her pregnancy was far along, and her grief had settled deep in her heart. She dressed in mourning clothes and spoke little, but her eyes carried a sharp awareness of everything around her. It was during this time that Ys Chi-jok decided to approach her. One afternoon, the king arrived at Adis' compound with a small group of attendants. His manner was calm, his voice gentle, his face arranged into an expression of concern. The villagers watched from a distance, whispering among themselves. "My daughter," the king said softly, "I have come to see how you are faring in this difficult time. The loss of your husband was tragic. You should not suffer alone." Adis stood before him, her back straight, her face unreadable. Ys Chi-jok continued, "A woman like you deserves protection. I can offer you comfort, shelter, and honor. You will lack nothing under my care." His words were smooth, but Adis heard what lay beneath them. She saw through the false sympathy. She remembered the anger in his eyes the day her husband was condemned. She remembered the silence when justice was begged for and denied. In that moment, she knew the king's intentions had nothing to do with kindness. She lifted her head and spoke clearly. "Your Majesty," she said, "I do not seek comfort. I seek justice." The king froze. "My husband was an innocent man," Adis continued. "He was killed without proof, without mercy. Until justice is done, I will not accept anything from you." The courtyard fell silent. For a brief moment, anger flashed across the king's face. His jaw tightened, and his eyes hardened. But just as quickly, he forced a smile, hiding his rage beneath calm words. "You are grieving," he said. "Time will soften your heart. When you are ready, you will understand that I only wish to care for you." Adis shook her head. "My heart is clear, Your Majesty. Do not return unless you come with truth." She turned and walked away, leaving the king standing in silence. The story spread quickly through Umuka. People whispered in markets and compounds about the widow who refused a king. Some admired her courage. Others feared for her safety. Never before had a woman spoken so boldly to Ys Chi-jok and lived to tell the story. Among the elders, unease grew. They met secretly at night, gathering in small groups to discuss what was happening in the kingdom. Many felt shame for remaining silent during Ikena's execution. Others feared that the people's anger was reaching a dangerous point. "The land is restless," one elder said quietly. "The people are losing trust," another replied. "If this continues, there may be rebellion." At last, the elders agreed that something had to be done. They prepared a petition and approached the palace, hoping reason would still prevail. Standing before Ys Chi-jok, they spoke carefully, urging him to review Ikena's case and calm the growing unrest. The king did not listen. "The matter is closed," he said sharply. "Ikena was a liar, and he paid the price. There will be no further discussion." The elders bowed and left the palace, their hearts heavy. Adiz remained unmoved. She continued to mourn her husband, holding tightly to truth and refusing to bend. And with every passing day, her quiet strength became a mirror that reflected the king's injustice back to the people of Umuka. The elders of Umuka could no longer rest. Night after night, sleep escaped them as the weight of injustice pressed heavily on their hearts. They had served many kings, but never had they witnessed a ruler so deaf to truth. After the king dismissed their petition, they knew that human words alone would no longer be enough. At dawn, the elders gathered in secret. "We must consult Allah, the goddess of the land," one elder said quietly. "She is the keeper of truth," another replied. "If injustice has been done, she will speak." With heavy hearts, they agreed. Before sunrise the next day, the elders set out on a solemn journey to Ohiamuo, the sacred forest where Allah was believed to dwell. The forest was deep and ancient, its trees tall and silent, their roots twisting through the earth like veins. No one entered the forest lightly. As they walked, no one spoke. At the sacred clearing, the elders prepared their offerings. They placed kola nuts, palm wine, and white cloth on the earth. Kneeling, they prayed with trembling voices. "Great Allah," they called, "if innocent blood has been shed in Umuka, reveal the truth. Do not let injustice poison our land." That night, Allah answered. Each elder dreamed the same dream. The earth shook beneath their feet. A powerful voice filled the air, heavy with anger and sorrow. "A great injustice has been done," the goddess said. "An innocent man was killed out of greed and desire. Truth must rise, and the guilty must face judgment." The elders woke in fear and awe. There was no doubt. Allah had spoken. At first light, they went again to Chijok. This time, their voices were firm. "We have consulted Allah," the senior elder said. "She demands that the case of Ikena be reopened." The king stiffened. Fear flickered in his eyes, though he tried to hide it. After a long silence, he spoke. "Very well," he said coldly. "Call the people. Let this matter be settled once and for all." Word spread quickly. The villagers were summoned to Amun-Dis. Men, women, and children gathered, whispering anxiously. Adiz stood among them, her hands resting on her stomach, her face calm but resolute. As the elders began to speak, the sky suddenly darkened. Clouds rolled in, thick and heavy. A strong wind swept through the square, lifting dust and shaking trees. Fear gripped the crowd. Then the earth trembled. From the very spot where Ikena had been buried, the ground split open. Slowly, a human skull rose from the soil. A gasp spread through the people as a loud, sorrowful song filled the air, far louder and more painful than before. The skull sang of betrayal. It sang of greed. It sang of an innocent man buried alive. The villagers cried out in fear. Some fell to their knees. Others covered their ears, unable to bear the sound. Then a mighty voice echoed from the sky. "The skull you hear," Allah declared, "belongs to a great warrior of old, falsely accused and killed. His spirit was cursed to sing until truth was revealed. His song is a warning, one that cannot be silenced." The king trembled. Sweat poured down his face as the skull's song filled the square. Chijok, the goddess thundered, "you have shed innocent blood. Make amends, or your punishment will fall upon you and your descendants." The skull slowly fell silent. The wind ceased. The sky cleared as if nothing had happened. The crowd stood frozen. Chijok bowed his head and spoke softly. "I hear the gods," he said. "I will reflect on these words." The elders watched him closely, but said nothing. As the people dispersed, the king's face hardened. Inside his heart, pride returned. The sky was clear. He still stood on his throne. He smiled to himself. "The gods have done nothing," he thought. "I remain king." And in his arrogance, Chijok believed he had fooled even the gods themselves. Days passed after the gathering at Amun-Dis, then weeks, and then months. Nothing happened. The sky remained clear. The earth was quiet. No sickness came upon Chijok, and no disaster touched his palace. As time went on, the fear that had once crept into his heart slowly faded. The king grew bold. He began to laugh when people spoke of divine justice. He walked with pride through the palace, his voice loud, his steps heavy. Those who once feared him now feared his arrogance even more. In private, he mocked the elders and their talk of gods and warnings. "Nothing will happen," he said often. "The gods are only stories to frighten the weak." To prove his power, Chi-Jok announced a great feast. He invited kings from neighboring lands, the elders of Umuka, and the people of the kingdom. The palace was filled with music, food, and laughter. Wine flowed freely. The king dressed in his finest robes, decorated with gold and jewels, and stood proudly before the crowd. Raising his voice, he addressed them. "Look at me," he said. "I stand before you unharmed. The gods have done nothing. Let this be known, no power stands above the king." The crowd murmured in uneasy silence. Then, without warning, everything changed. The music stopped. The air became thick and heavy. Torches along the walls began to flicker wildly, casting strange shadows. A deep stillness filled the hall, so sudden and unnatural that every heart froze. Chi-Jok turned to step away. His feet would not move. He tried to speak, but no sound came from his mouth. Panic filled his eyes as he realized he was trapped in his own body. His hands trembled, but he could not lift them. The crowd watched in fear as the proud king stood frozen like stone. Then a powerful voice filled the hall. "You thought you had escaped judgment," the voice thundered. "But justice does not forget." The goddess Allah appeared, her presence heavy with anger. The torches burned brighter, then dimmed. The king's eyes widened in terror as her power surrounded him. "You shed innocent blood," Allah declared. "You mocked truth. Now you will live as a warning." With those words, Chi-Jok screamed, but the sound twisted into madness. His body collapsed to the ground. When he rose again, his eyes were empty. He could not speak clearly. He could not reason. The proud king had lost his senses. The people gasped. Some wept. Others stepped back in fear. The elders stepped forward. "This man can no longer rule," they declared. "The gods have judged him." That same day, Chi-Jok was stripped of his crown and banished from the palace. His royal family was removed from power. The once mighty king wandered the village naked and mad, a living shadow of who he once was. Children whispered when they saw him. Elders turned their faces away. For a time, the Ndi-Ichi Umuka ruled the land together. They restored order and ruled with care. At Ama-Ndi's, they built a shrine for the singing skull, placing it there as a symbol of truth and justice, so that no one would forget what had happened. Adiz at last found peace. Though her pain never fully left her, her heart was calm. She raised her son, Obina, teaching him the story of his father and the cost of injustice. She taught him honesty, humility, and respect for both people and the gods. Obina grew into a wise and thoughtful young man. The elders watched him closely. When the time came, they chose him to rule Umuka. He was crowned king, not because of blood alone, but because of his character. Under King Obina, Umuka flourished. Justice returned to the land. The poor were protected, and the truth was honored. People lived without fear, knowing that wrongdoing would not go unseen. Years later, on a quiet morning, a faint melody was heard once again near the shrine. The singing skull had appeared, gentle this time, reminding the people of Umuka that truth never dies. And so the story was passed down through generations. That injustice always reveals itself. That power without righteousness destroys. And that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always rise. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories.